many student athletes, the ability to go out and play the sport that they have dedicated their lives to means the world to them, especially at the collegiate level. But outside the glitz and glam of the field or the court, their treatment is subpar by these schools. Many of these schools make millions of dollars, and the NCAA as a whole that runs each division of athletic competition at the college level makes billions per year. In fact, in the 2018-19 school year, the University of Texas made 223 million from their athletic program. $223 million, and not a cent of that goes to any student athletes. This is a recurring theme across college athletics, as many schools rack in millions of dollars a year, pay coaches and staffers millions of dollars a year. In fact, Alabama head coach Nick Saban of their football team makes $9.1 million to coach a team per year, and none of his players make a single cent off of that. There are the arguments to where student athletes do get scholarships, but only 2% of student athletes actually wind up with a full ride scholarship. The rest either having to pay for school out of pocket or getting half ride or quarter ride scholarships for most of their schooling, their housing, their meal plans all have to come out of pocket. And for many students, this becomes an issue because they are unable to go get jobs or unable to find other means of making money or paying for things because they're so busy with their athletics and their studying. In fact, student athletes spend around 45 hours a week on athletic training, practices, games, studying film, all that stuff, and around 40 hours a week on their studies, leaving very little time for rest and necessary eating and any social life that might be important for their mental states. This promotes a problem because for young student athletes who are in their late teens, early 20s, a social life and anything like that is very important for their mental states. And it is proven that if an athlete is not in the right mental mindset, he's not going to perform to his full potential. According to Forbes, the top Division I schools make around $8.5 billion a year, with 58% of those earnings coming from their football and basketball programs, the biggest two sports watched at the collegiate level, and the two that make the most money from sponsorship, viewership, broadcasting rights, and merchandise sale. But only 7% of those earnings go into the scholarships and funding for housing for their students. So not only are the students hardly getting scholarships, 2% is nothing. There's over 460,000 student athletes in the NCAA at all levels, and only 2% of those athletes are on any full ride scholarships, and only around 8% are on any sort of scholarship at all, even partial, even a 10% scholarship, where maybe their housing is paid for. So the lack of payment and the lack of, anything really besides a chance to play for a school's athletic team really hurts a lot of athletes and prevents many of them from playing from their full potential. And for many of these athletes, the goal is to get to the next level, to the pros, and only 2% of those athletes end up going to the pros. So for 98% of student athletes who have to pay out, find a way to make ends meet, pay out of pocket, find a career path after school, because this is only 4 years of their lives, 4 years that are spent countlessly studying and training for their sport, they have to somehow find a way to mix in new interests and find a new passion and career path in their life. And this prevents a lot of mental strain and a lot of pressure for these student athletes. So how do we fix these issues? Well, we can start by paying the athletes. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but we could go hypothetically 50% of the income that the NCAA makes, which they make $8.5 billion annually. 50% of that could go to the student athletes, just like how in the NFL and NBA, 50% of the money made goes to the players. And with those metrics, that would mean the average college football player would be making $360,000 a year. That's way more than even just the top 5% of Americans when it comes to income. That's nearly in the 1%. And the top basketball players, at the collegiate level due to smaller teams would be making almost $500,000 a year, which you think about it, and those are the top 2 sports, and a lot of people will beg the question, well, what about the sports that don't make as much? Because those are the 2 most watched sports. A lot of sports like swim and dive, women's soccer, a lot of women's sports actually don't get the attention that, the athletes deserve, as they put in, like I said, nearly 85 hours a week into keep maintaining their grades and studying and training for their sports. So an easy solution would be just to give them as little as maybe $800 a week. That's next to nothing compared to what the rich businessman and the corporate officials make for these institutions. So it wouldn't be a huge strain on the NCAA to pay student athletes like that. It would be a heck of a compensation for the work and the dedication that they put in for these schools and for these athletic programs that make millions upon billions of dollars a year from their hard work. They are the product of this industry. They're the whole point. Without student athletes, none of this exists. So why shouldn't they be paid a substantial or even small amount of the money that they make for these schools and the school runners and all the programs? I mean, a lot of the funding that these athletic programs bring in are for schools and for upgrades to the schools, but these upgrades only benefit these students so much, and it really just doesn't match the output that they put in for these schools. Another reason why they deserve to be paid is what I said earlier. A lot of them aren't going to go pro. So in the very least, if a student's not going to go pro in this sport, they should at least be given compensation for playing it, due to the fact that later on in life they're going to be in a new career. Maybe it will still be in sports, but they're not going to be playing. They're not going to be making the millions upon millions of dollars that many of these pro athletes make. They're only going to be making, 80, 90,000 a year. So why not give them the advantage that a lot of these other college students are able to have, or even those who don't attend college, who can be making money during that 4-year stretch. That's very vital to development over the course of adulthood. I mean, college years are some of the most important years of your life, even if you're not attending college. It's the building block to your adult life. It's figuring out yourself, it's making money, but with many of these student athletes dedicating so much time, they don't really have the time to build that, especially mentally. Mental states are the most important part of the body, and with the obstructed mental state due to the focus and time put into their sports and studying, it really takes away from a lot of development. So paying them, even like I said, just around $800 a week would be nothing. It takes barely anything out of the pockets of these schools and these administrators and the NCAA itself, which again is a $1 billion industry. $1 billion goes a long way, and when your organization, which by the way is funny enough listed as a non-profit, is making $8 billion a year, it shows you it could be paying its student athletes a heck of a lot more, much of that money in which they deserve. But in conclusion, I understand some of the arguments against paying student athletes. I get that maybe it should meet what level of play they bring and what they bring into the school due to sponsorships and watchability and interest, but for all the effort and all the time that student athletes bring to these sports and all the passion they put in, representing a school across their chest or on their head, representing it in any way, they deserve to be compensated for the money they bring in.